It's actually quite fascinating what the understanding of concepts can actually do for your navigation of the world. You know, this thing that's seemingly vague and abstract, the ideas that we have in our minds. And what I'm specifically talking about, and I'm just going to focus on certain aspects of success, because I've said this a few times before, because I've really come to the realization. But the work that I do as a clinical hypnotist and a metaphysical scientist, a personal fitness trainer, group fitness instructor, as well as a martial arts coach and self-defense instructor, it's really become evident that I'm basically a very advanced life coach. I don't, that title, I don't know, I think it's funny, but I'm saying that right now because I've realized that it is the most precise and concise way to describe what it is that I do. I have this variety of skill sets, and if you really look at the purpose of all of it, it comes down to basically being, like I said, a really highly advanced life coach that has several valuable skill sets that have been developed over decades. And that's because I diligently every day study and practice metaphysics, which is I put into practice spirituality, which I really focus on emotional control and self-control and my relationships with others, and science, which is the practice of applying the applied science of nutrition and physiology, the movement of my body, getting adequate rest, and the research of why all of these things are important, and philosophy, the origin of where these ideas come from and how they are developed and how they are transmitted throughout the world and across humanity in all walks of life. And music, I'm a practitioner. I write lyrics, I sing, I compose, and I play various musical instruments, as well as record them and publish them. And then martial arts. I've been a lifelong practitioner of martial arts, starting with the philosophies of Miyamoto Musashi and Bruce Lee, and a movement based on capoeira with boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, freestyle American wrestling, judo, African catch-as-catch-can wrestling, so on and so forth. So I've got, and a whole bunch of street fighting. And I've got a practice, these things I've been practicing. Like, I've never let them go ever since I was a kid, really. And, I have an online record of a lot of this starting in 2006, so 20 years ago, but I've been practicing much longer than that, 20 years before that. So I'll just say, it's about 40 years. Yeah, I'm 48 now, I'll be 49 this year, so it has been quite a long time. I actually even can say that I've been focusing on these things even before that, but 8 years old, I would really put it at, in all seriousness, if I'm really going to put a date, it would be 32 years ago, when I was 16, was when I really started coming into my own. For some reason, in 1993, a lot of very significant things happened with music and martial arts and metaphysics for me. All of those things somehow converged in the year 1993. Interestingly enough, when I wrote a song called FTW, which you can imagine what that stands for if you want to look for it, you can find it online. And I have a tattoo of FTW on my left shoulder. But all of that I'm saying because in all of this time of putting together the information that I have and having the perspective that I do, the concept that I'm talking about here that's led to really productive applications, because I originally started saying that it's fascinating to me and inspiring that something that you think about and a perspective that you have, meaning a way of looking at something and understanding it, actually has real world results and effects and influence. And so specifically what I'm talking about here is how right now this recording actually is a very meta example of that, but you wouldn't know it just necessarily by listening to it, but maybe you can. Maybe you're a person who can feel the energy in a person's voice and understand what's being transmitted that is more than just what's being said. And I can articulate it. And what it is I have come to the understanding and the realization of how potent and relevant and significant my voice and my understanding, the knowledge that I'm transmitting, the information that I have to share, just how important it actually is. And with that comes an increased sense of confidence, and a confidence that is based on actual experience and prior results, a compounding effect that has a foundation of precedence, things that have preceded, that have come before from consistent practice. And it's right now, as I'm driving and recording, this is putting in practice again this idea and this understanding, because I know that by communicating my personal development journey, my path towards perfection, which perfection always is and never will be, meaning it's perfect to practice, but in this physical world we can't really necessarily say that we know perfection unless we philosophically accept that we are perfect just the way that we are, right? And that every moment that we practice and we become better, we still remain perfect just as we are. And again, that's a little bit philosophical and spiritual even. So, but what I mean is that as I continue to make progress and my confidence and understanding grows, the conceptual clarity and the realization that the information that I'm transmitting is not only going to be, but has been and will continue to be beneficial to those who hear and understand. And that provides motivation and inspiration to continue. And through continuance, I'm multiplying it, the understanding and the energetic force with which I'm able to transmit the information, the potency of my communication is being amplified and in an exponential way. not just purely additive, being in sort of a 1 plus 1 or 2 plus 2 or even 3 plus 3 or 10 plus 10 fashion, but more like 10 times 10, 100 times 100. It's exponential. It's 10 to the 10th power, right? 100, a billion, a million to the nth power. And that is quite magnificent, because it also reveals why someone can deliver maybe the same exact message or something similar to what I'm saying and it not have as much impact as when and how I say it, because of the absolute conviction that I have, the knowing from consistent practice, from consistent application, and the awareness to be able to analyze objectively the results. And again, I've said that just recording this is an artifact of that. And I really mean to elucidate, to communicate, to let you know that it's because there are a lot of communicators who may not necessarily be completely aware that the message they have to deliver of exactly how impactful and relevant and how much needed it is to be heard by others. Because sometimes, and I know this for a fact, and this is part of that understanding, I know that I myself have heard things that I intuitively knew to be true, to be relevant, to be impactful, to be important for people to hear, and have simply repeated them without the actual experiential and internal conviction. But it is because of that, and because of continuing, being resilient, being persistent and consistent, that over time, I've been able to experience the results of that. And one of those results happens to be the ability to be an effective communicator through the written and spoken word, and how valuable of a skill that is to have, to the point where I've realized that I can transmit all sorts of knowledge, spiritual, mental, and physical knowledge, meaning I am teaching metaphysics, artistic skill, and martial arts through presence of mind and through the spoken and written word, because of perspective and understanding, a deep understanding knowledge that goes beyond just the concepts, but through practice, so that when I am communicating the concepts, they are that much more potent. And that's my word of the day right now, because this is what keeps coming up: potent, impactful, significant. I don't know if that's the right order to use those words, because I almost maybe I should say significant, impactful, and potent. Sip. Right? Take a sip. And I'm an acronym nerd, and this really has been such an incredible perspective to have living these concepts that have been previously spoken in such a real way that I can touch and feel and hand to other people. Because it's grounded in my lived reality. I'm a little distracted because I'm looking for some particular place and I don't see it. Alright, I found what I was looking for and completed that task. And so, getting back to this understanding, let me just go into right now while I have a little bit of time. I have a few minutes before my next stop. Actually, it says 13 minutes. And so let's go into some real practical, real world stuff here. So one of the things that I've been continuously hearing as I drive a lot, I'm driving right now, and one of the things I do are either I'm in production mode, like right now, where I'm recording, and this is going to be a podcast, or I'm learning. So I'm listening to something. I'm either listening to some audio only podcast or listening to the audio from a video that's on various different platforms. And usually long form, meaning they're not like these little shorts that are 60 seconds long, so that I can get a little bit more in-depth understanding. And one of the things I've been hearing a lot about is personal branding, because there are some staggering numbers of people who are online attempting to be influencers and content creators and all these catchwords that go along with people, producing media. I've just always thought of myself as a producer, because that's somewhat old school. That's how it started off. And you have movie producers, music producers, right? So just producer, and produce is, if you read or have read Wealth of Nations, you'll know that Adam Smith calls wealth the produce of the land and the labor of humankind. He actually said the labor of mankind. I just like to use the labor of humankind. But let's look at some of the practical things that I'm actually talking about here. And one of them is in this personal branding idea that the word gets thrown around, or that term, not just word, but the term, because there's two words there, right? So personal branding, that label gets thrown around a lot. And one entrepreneur named Chris Do, who talks about this a lot more lately, has brought to the surface and clarified his understanding of personal branding. And when I heard it, I could relate to it very well, or get on board with that, because it makes sense to me. But it's also, a form of constructive confirmation bias in a lot of ways. Confirmation bias, maybe I'll explain it later, but you should look it up. But it really is used a lot of times in a negative connotation when it's said that people use confirmation bias basically to just uphold ideas that they already have, which is really what it is. I guess I did define it. It's just when you accept ideas or research or anything else that agrees with what you already believe or what you want. And in this case, I find it to be constructive. But then again, how would I really know? But I do know objectively. But that's the whole thing about confirmation bias, is that I think that sometimes one of the reasons why it's also seen as negative is because the people, those who fall into that, don't really see sometimes that there might be actually problems with what they believe, and that just finding things that support what they're already saying could be problematic. And this is, we know other terms for this, which confirmation bias light is like echo chambers. And I say light like LITE, you have like diet soda. So diet confirmation bias is like echo chambers. Singing, preaching to the choir is another, right? But preaching to the choir speaks more to people who already know and just are being, talked to or communicated to by those who know the same thing. So, but they're related. They're cousins. But the one thing that Chris Do said was that personal branding is, more appropriately perceived as being a combination of documenting your personal development journey and publishing it so that others can develop themselves. I put that into my own words, but that's really the essence of what he's talking about. But there's also another part of this that when I combine it with the excessive amount of posting on various different platforms that is recommended by Gary V, and the things that he also says about self-awareness and also about branding and personal brand. What I'm really distilling from this is the reason why you're doing that and the way that you do it, right? You do it in a certain way. And I encourage the excessive posting. But what I'm saying here, there's a difference in the way to do it. There's a fake and performative, deceptive way to do it. And that's where from what I understand, a lot of people burn out because they're attempting to contrive things too much. They're attempting to script and make things they're overproducing. They're like attempting to be like a writer of Hollywood. And I do understand that it's important to have something that is in some form, coherent enough for people to understand it. But from my experience and what I'm doing now, I understand being what I'm talking about, how I'm presenting right now is what was the term I used for this before was something like rambling, a coherent rambling, right? And it's because I understand, I know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just that I might free associate and go off on tangents here and there. But I can always come back to the core idea of what I'm talking about. And what I'm really talking about here is this idea of personal branding, but what it really actually, and this is my professional, expert, and personal opinion, my PEP. Told you I was an acronym nerd. Professional, expert, personal. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive, those things. They can actually be the same thing. As a matter of fact, a lot of things that I do professionally I have a personal passion for. And that goes along with this idea that I've been hearing a lot more of called ikigai, the Japanese term about that you should do things that you're passionate about and love, that you're also really good at, that the world needs and you can earn money from, right? So I think those are the components of it. I'm not sure, but it seems right. But what also seems right is what Chris Do has said, and Gary Vaynerchuk and several others, that I'm synthesizing this perspective into my own, is I'm realizing that I'm also excessively publishing. I'm excessively creating and publishing and putting content out there, mostly in the written and spoken word, mostly spoken, because it's such a simple medium. You will hear people talk all the time about faceless podcast or faceless YouTube. That's what podcasting is originally. Podcasting is audio only. And you can do that anywhere. I'm doing it while I'm driving in the same way that people can listen to this while they're driving. I can make podcasts while I'm at the gym in the same way. Well, I don't know if it would work out because I actually do a lot of backflips and crazy acrobatic stuff while I'm in the gym. But you understand what I'm saying. But you could listen to this if I actually have an amplifier that I go to the park with, and I play music from it. And so if I wanted to listen to some kind of personal development or motivational or whatever kind of audio like this, I could put it on blast at the park. And So that's why audio only is such a powerful medium. And so, what I'm saying here is that it's such a, I can create this en masse very quickly, very rapid fire, get it out there because I don't edit anything. I'm recording it while I'm driving. I call them lo-fi podcasts, lo-fi audio podcasts. When I read my books that I've done audiobooks, I call them lo-fi audiobook podcast. And because I can do it while I'm on the go. I'm driving right now, and I'm going to get this done, and then I'm going to have it transcribed, and I'm going to have it summarized, and then I'm going to create a title, description, and tags, and upload it to the podcast software on Spreaker, and it's going to be distributed to Amazon Audible, to Apple Podcast, to iHeartRadio, to Spotify, and to YouTube, and then also to Facebook and X, and then also to GeoSavan and Podchaser and Castbox, and I forget what the other ones are, but there's like a dozen places that it gets automatically simultaneously published to. And so, but the point is though that in the public brand, in the personal branding atmosphere, the goal of personal branding, right, is that what I'm really doing is simply amplifying who I am. I'm creating, so the purpose of creating excessive amounts of content is to do it in a way that, and I know this word is used so excessively, and it's even virtue signaled, and most of the time it's not real, but in an authentic way, like meaning just you, like I'm just driving and I'm stream of consciousness. I didn't script anything. I just start speaking from things that I'm inspired to speak about, and then I go because I know the subjects, as I was talking about earlier, and this, I understand the concepts deeply from lived practice, from lived experience, so I don't have to contrive anything. I don't have to make it up, and if anything does get created or manufactured that's new, it's done on the spot because it's in relation, and I'm understanding what I'm talking about from a new perspective that is, or a more clear perspective that has been elucidated from the fact that I'm communicating it out loud. And there's something related to that's a unique spin to the understanding of personal branding in this way, which is that a concept I learned at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where I have my degree in clinical hypnosis. And it's this understanding that about 25% of the people that experience your communication, so your content, and I'm adding that especially if it's uniquely and authentically you, they will automatically be significantly influenced by what you are communicating in such a way that it becomes part of their being, so that now they have a new option in their psychological experience that they can operate from, because it's gotten past their critical faculties. It's not seen as being a threat to their survival. It actually is seen as something that is a new piece of information that could potentially help them. And that's what we learn in hypnosis, is that, things get blocked or filtered out from getting into the subconscious mind, which is the seat of your behavioral control, because it might be seen as anti-survival, and only those things get past that are familiar or are accepted as being things that are going to be beneficial to you. But if we think about this, 25% of the people automatically, without you having to do anything, you don't have to perform, you don't have to fake it, You don't have to script. You don't have to overproduce. Just in the same way that you meet people and make friends with them, especially if they're real, genuine friends, they're going to like you for who you are. And I know sometimes that gets lost on people because there's a lot of stuff out there that says, especially when I look at the dating scene and a lot of this red pill stuff that's going on out there about, people say don't be yourself because the people you're dating or women or other people don't want to see who you are. You have to kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of pros and cons. But I really understand that you should really just do your best to, if people don't like you, then that doesn't really matter. And in some cases there might be some real world consequences, but some people over prioritize that because I think that people over prioritize it to the extent of the extreme of ostracization and excommunication, and how the removal of them from most of society, they just have like pain, torture, and death like as the end result of it, which may have been the case back in tribal communities and things like that. But now it's really more in alignment with the way that people fear public speaking. A lot of people just don't want to stand out, and there's no real grounding to it except just that people don't want to stick out and don't want to be alone. And there's also things about loneliness, so on and so forth, but it's not life and death necessarily. I would like to think not. My understanding is that it's not. But there's a lot of overemphasis on that. But here's what I'm really, really honing in on here is the fact that when you are uniquely yourself as only you can be, and you constantly broadcast that out in the world, because this is what social media and the technology is actually doing, is it's simply amplifying your reach. And in a world where there are 5 billion people online on social media and things like that and producing content, and hundreds of millions of them wanting to be content creators or influencers, your one advantage is to produce as much as you possibly can that is you. So really basically just documenting your life. Like, I borrowed a description of myself from what was given to Jack Herer in a documentary about him that was called The Emperor of Hemp. And he was described, like the books that he wrote were described as part autobiography, part scientific document, and part journalistic expose. And so that's what my life is. It's very autobiographical, documentarian, and exposition. I'm revealing things that I'm learning and about me and how it's helping me, and how I'm also able to share that with other people so that they can improve their quality of life in some way. And that is really, here's the bottom line. And I gotta go do something, but I'm gonna get to this afterwards. So I'm gonna go make this run, and then on the way back, then we're gonna finish this off. But really, what it has to do with is being well-rounded. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So I often talk about this practice of being well-rounded. And I use the word practice in a similar way to me having a clinical practice as a clinical hypnotist, or that a doctor would have a medical practice, or even a professional athlete practices their sport, right? It's something that you have to do consistently and that you're always improving upon. There's really never any end to it. You're not going to reach some final state of bliss where you're just done practicing and done learning. And the practice of being well-rounded. There's a time when I was growing up in school, and I know that this is still a very similar thing that people, get made fun of or joke about. Everybody wants to put people in categories, right? You're either a nerd or you're a jock, right? Everybody's like, you've got to pick one. You can't be both smart and talented, or you can't be both talented and and I'm talking about artistically talented, like music or painting or things like that, the liberal arts. You can't be talented and a jock, or you can't be athletic, the jock, and intelligent, academic, or God forbid you're all three, right? Because you got to be put into some category. You got to be a band nerd or a chorus geek or a football or basketball jock, jarhead, or what. I don't even know what all that stuff is, right? Or like, he's a metalhead, all this other stuff, right? For some reason, everybody just wants to put you in some category. It's really absolutely ridiculous. And maybe I see it as being ridiculous because I do all of those things. I'm an athlete, so I dance and I practice martial arts, and I like to run sometimes. I go on long walks. I like to climb, jump, spin, flip, like just, being just generally hyperactive. But I also am hyper productive in creating music and reading and writing and speaking. So, and these have been lifelong pursuits. They're not just something I just decided to do yesterday. These are things that I want to do all the time. And so therefore, I do. And what does that have anything whatsoever to do with real personal branding? Right? What does that have anything at all to do with it? Well, I'm glad you asked, but let me tell you. So what this has to do with personal branding is that when you really have dedicated your life because you're passionate about it. So let's look at, this whole idea of ikigai once again, right? Which I'm not even sure I've got it right. I'm just basing it off of the things that I've been skimming from various different sources and people who've said it to me, right? But ikigai, as far as I'm using it, correlates with something that you've heard many times before, but my mom said a lot as well, which is do what you love and the money will follow, right? And so I'm looking at that as a shorthand way of saying, something that you love doing, that you're passionate about, that you're also really good at, that the world needs, and you can earn money from it, right? So those seem to be the components of this ikigai that people are talking about, this Japanese concept, although I'm not certain. But what I am certain of is that's what I mean when I say do what you love and the money will follow. That you're really good at something that you love and the world needs it, meaning it's going to benefit other people, and you can earn money from it. And so when you're well-rounded, this actually blossoms from your well-roundedness. When you are physically fit and curious and open-minded, right? Because it's not about being smart or intelligent or genius, right? Being curious and open-minded and talented, these things, and you just happen to be that way because you love to read and research, right? And I say read and research because there's lots of other ways to learn things, like listening to people, going to lectures, having conversations, watching videos, as well as reading books, right? So if you really love that, which I do, all of the above, and I also am obsessed with not only enjoying music like many people are, but also composing it, all the way from the lyrics to the various different instruments and vocal arrangements and everything and all that, as well as practicing martial arts and finding all of the most effective, techniques that deal with combat and the physical fitness that comes with that as well. And so that to me is being well-rounded, because I'm not just stuck in one domain, but I realize because of that they're all related. There's a very intellectual and academic component, if you look for it, in martial arts. There's a physics of martial arts. There's a science of the nutrition of your physiology of your body. Even in capoeira, which is a base of a lot of my movement, there's rhythm, there's dance, there's music, there's history. There's so much that goes into it, right? That deals with music. So that's artistic skill. There is, the historical context and the research that goes into that, and the relationships and the statistics they're all interrelated. And then also in martial arts and music, you'll find that there's a spirituality behind it. There's a lot of music that is used specifically for spiritual practices and religious practices. There are a lot of philosophical and spiritual concepts that are integrated and intertwined from long ago with various different martial arts. And so, these things, sometimes people want to look at them as being separate, but they're not. And from the perspective that I have, and from the research that I do, they are not. We live in an eternal reality, and in an eternal existence, there is no separation of anything. They're simply different perspectives. And, this very idea of separation is something, an artifact that is useful for certain things, individuality and our experience of the world, but it's not necessarily absolutely real. It's not the final reality. It is real, but it's not final, right? Because to say something is not real is actually a little bit ridiculous to me when considering eternal existence. Everything is real. It's just that not everything is relevant to your perspective of existence. And not everything is relevant to every type of existence that you're living. We're in a physical, three-dimensional reality, and the things that are relevant here are not relevant in the dream world, for example. Not all of it. And I could give so many more examples of that. But being well-rounded puts you in a position of not having to fake anything. You actually, faking is just superficiality. When you actually are talented and curiously intelligent and physically skilled, you already are interesting. You don't even have to try. I remember someone who I met years ago, a woman named Ashley Bell. She worked out at this gym that I was a trainer at and a group fitness instructor. And there were a lot of celebrities that worked out there, so I'm not surprised. But her dad did some of the voices, Michael Bell, for the Transformers and G.I. Joe cartoons, whatever. But one day when I was talking to her, and I'm not exactly sure how it got to this point, but I said, Ashley, you're really interesting. And then she said, right away, without even hesitation, without even skipping a beat, which was why it was somewhat startling and why I remember it. But she said, interested is interesting. And so when you really are interested in things to the point where you obsessively research them and practice them and record it in journals, and you're just looking at it from all these different perspectives because it's part of your life, then you are interested in those things, and you're just, I feel, I understand, I know, my experience is that you are interesting. All the people who are interested in things, who are genuinely interested in things, are interesting. And so that is where being well-rounded comes into play. You don't have to fake anything. Because when you are really living a life of doing all of these things, and you're researching them and you're learning all about it, just like how I'm talking right now, you just know it. You don't have to script it. You don't have to make anything up. You just have to start perhaps with a central idea, which I did, which was really, focused around the idea of personal branding and what that really means, which is just doing your best. Basically, what's even coming to mind right now? Personal branding is basically figuring out how you can become famous for being you. And if what you do is not particularly like celebrity worthy necessarily, like you're not an actor or a rock star type or something like that, right? You just need to amplify your voice and exponentially propagate or publicize who you are. And the more that you get the word out that you exist, the more you can get your name and your likeness in front of people, the more they will know you and find out about you. And that 25% that is automatically going to like you and be influenced by you, that I mentioned earlier, that I learned about from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, will catch on to it. And some of those people will know each other. And some of those people will talk about you. And they'll talk about to other people. And those other people who weren't automatically influenced or like you in the first place will be convinced to like you by the other people who like you, because people are very much creatures of community, and a lot of times are followers, and get in with the crowd and conform and so on and so forth. And so then you build up a community like that, and you build up from a community, you become popular, and you become popular, then you become famous, and you become a celebrity in there's various different levels of that. And Dan Kennedy, who's a marketing genius, talks about this as well. And so, and you are becoming just well known for being good at things. And not only for being good at things, but for being good at things that you care about, and caring about other people and things that are going to help those other people that you care about. Like this perspective that I'm dropping on you right now. This is something very important for people to understand. That all you're doing is amplifying what would normally happen locally. So if you're a big jerk and people don't like you in your hood, then the more you amplify yourself, those same people aren't going to like you, and they're going to know you're a jerk. But then there's people who are going to, right? 25%. You don't even have to try. And so if we're looking at this from a business, influencer, entrepreneurial, and all these other type of perspectives in which you're looking to then produce some kind of transaction, income, influence in a way that is going to improve your life as well, because you want to monetize it or something like that, why not do it from this completely genuine place where you're simply just being who you are and putting it out there and distributing it as much as you possibly can, so that people know who you are, so they can decide for themselves whether they like you or not, and they don't have to guess, right? Because all of the fakery, all of the people who are focusing on superficiality over substance, or on charisma over character, right, over form, and looking at form over function, all the fakery, all the just the artificiality that's out there. This is why people have such distrust of a lot of celebrities and influencers, because they know that people are just bought and paid for, and that people are just saying things just because they're endorsed and that they're getting paid to say these things, right? I have no such affiliations. I have zero. I've been an independent multimedia producer for 20 years. I've been paying to be online. I've been paying to have my blogs and then podcasts and everything online, and the two platforms that I'm using, Spreaker and GoDaddy. I've been paying for those. Nobody's been paying me for that. It's only been in the last recent couple of years that I've been looking at these monetization strategies, because I've never monetized anything on YouTube. There are videos that I have that have commercials that come on YouTube. I never did that. And maybe I should start looking into doing that as well, of how I can redirect that towards me. but I haven't done that. And I don't have any affiliations that are going to stop me from saying anything. There's nobody who has any money in my pocket that's going to influence what I'm going to say about anything. But now with the way that the platforms that I'm using, specifically Spreaker, how it works, and the fact that I have written and published books and I can direct people to buy those and it comes directly to me. Well, I don't have anything restricting me. There was a short period of time where I think it was for about 9 months where I was an on-air personality and producer for an FM radio station in Los Angeles, and I had restrictions on certain things that I could say because there were huge sponsors like big name soda brands and you know, like prophylactic companies, like condom companies, and like it was like Trojan and Pepsi and just different things like that. And so there were certain things, because they, you know, wouldn't want to be affiliated with somebody who was saying certain things, that I couldn't say. There were certain restrictions, and I have none of those. So and that's actually one of the reasons why I left, specifically because I was just looking at all of the stuff that was being restricted and things I couldn't say, and especially because at the time I was getting involved with and researching the Zeitgeist movement and Peter Joseph and looking at the stuff they were talking about, and then there were just certain things that were being said to me, and I said, okay, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing this. And I left. And so, but that's the thing. There's a lot of fakery out there, and then there's also a lot of performative fakery that may not necessarily have anything to do with how people are being compensated, but people are faking and just doing a lot of things that are trendy and that they feel like is going to get attention because they see other people are doing it and they've been given templates for that, and that there's all this training on how to be a social media influencer, because that's what's going on online for the most part. And so they're doing it because of that. And this really, you know, is one of the, I don't, you know, I can't pretend to know why. I don't live other people's lives. I don't know what they're going through. And so I just don't understand why people operate in that way. But if I do think about it, I actually can get a little bit more of a clearer perspective on this, because, you know, I do remember some of the performative and like a little bit of the, you know, the fakery and the salesmanship, because I was involved with a couple of, starting in I think 2003, with network marketing companies, and I didn't really understand what people were doing. And there were a lot of manipulative tactics and things that people were saying, and it was like, you know, be like this, and this is how you approach people, and all this kind of other stuff. And it felt really uncomfortable, because not because selling is inherently uncomfortable. It's just that I feel like somewhere along the line, in what they call the upline, somewhere far up there, some sleazy, dishonest, salesy person, right? Because doesn't have to be dishonest. Salesmanship can be all about informing people and making sure that they understand that you have what they actually need, right? But there was somewhere along the line that the way that the process was transmitted was in just a really scummy, schemy, scammy way. I like that, scummy, schemy, scammy, right? So, but if you put yourself in that position, you know, you're gonna get what you're gonna get. It's not good. So that's really the, you know, one of the main issues with all of that. But you don't have to be performative in that way. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to dance a jig. Like, I mean, there's just so much goofy stuff that people are doing for attention, because they've got one part of it right. Okay, this is an attention economy, right? This is why long ago we've already used the term pay along with attention. You pay attention. And when you're paying attention because you're spending time. Time and attention, it takes time to pay attention. The cost of attention is your time. So you pay attention by spending time. And people often say that, time is money. But what really is time? Time is life. It's your lifetime. So what you're really spending, the cost of your attention, is your lifetime. So people have gotten that part correct. It's just that there's so many go-betweens and so many, what do we call it? There's so much intervening stuff that it's just kind of got lost in translation what is actually going on here. Your life is the value. That's exactly what you're being given paper money and coins for, is your actual life force. The labor of humankind. You are a human. The direct source is the produce of the land and the labor of humankind. And your labor costs your life, the time that passes by that you never get back. And so to live that in performance for other people's life when you don't really have anything of substance is really sinister, or at the very least misguided. And so the perspective here to take that I'm strongly suggesting is one that, again, and I've said this over and over again, but I'm going to say it at least one more time to drive the point, is that what you're really simply doing is, okay, here's the best way to even say this right now that I'm thinking about it. I'm going to start moving forward. The next time that I talk about this, I'm going to put it in this perspective. So there was this movie called The Truman Show starring Jim Carrey, in which he was a part of a show that he didn't know that he was part of. So he was living his life in this suburban town, and everybody else were actors, and they were in on it, and they knew, but he didn't. He was just being watched all the time. There were cameras in the sky everywhere. Everything was fake. He was on a set. He just didn't know it, but he was just being who he thought he was in that environment. So just imagine that this is happening, but you do know, but instead of trying to act like all those other people were, you put yourself in the position of Truman, and you are the producer, however. So you're recording your videos, you're writing your words, you're recording your voice, just like how I'm doing now. You're just being you. You're observing the world, you're learning things about it, and then you're reporting about it, and then you're publishing what you've reported on, so that other people can learn from your perspective. And so it's like that idea that you're basically just documenting your life experiences and sharing them with other people, because you are a well-rounded person who actually really is interesting, because you are interested in productive and valuable activities. And so you should have all the confidence in sharing that with people. I think that a lot of times the lack of confidence that people have in this thing that people call imposter syndrome, which Gary Vaynerchuk rightly exposes as simply being insecurity, a lot of that comes from people in various different spectrums of it, because they're being insincere. Insincerity breeds insecurity, and a lot of people know that, but haven't really pinpointed it. Or the insecurity comes from just being actually being insufficient. That could be a part of it, meaning that you just really ain't about nothing. And if you are, then maybe you should either go ahead and being about something, because life is wasted. Why not? I mean, it doesn't mean you have to do things to be a celebrity, to be famous, to be known about it. But if you're going to be out there trying to put yourself out and be some kind of influencer, or quasi-celebrity, or build up a personal brand, then, I mean, come on, like, what are you doing if not being actually a real interesting person because you're interested in productive, life-affirming, valuable activities and things of substance. So that really is it. There's not, I mean, I came to this conclusion right here just talking about this, but that's really what the essence of this is all about, is you don't have to perform. You can be polished. Like, for example, I'm very polished in a lot of ways, but that's because I've practiced speaking and communicating by being more and more educated in my native language of English. And so that when I read things, I understand as much as I possibly can about what I'm reading by defining all of the words and things that I don't understand. And then, and that's really, a major thing, is just making sure that I understand what I'm consuming. And if I don't understand it right away, make a note of it and find out, because that just makes me better and better. And then I'm able to have more and more ideas that I understand that intertwine and intermingle with each other and get synthesized inside my brain and become my own. This acronym I created, SAPAST, SAPAST, which is study, adopt, practice, adapt, share, teach. You study things, that just simply means input. You're consuming information from wherever you can get it. Adopting it is now it lives within your consciousness, your memory, without you necessarily having to read the stuff all the time now, because now you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it and you remember the stuff that you learned. You practice it because then either you're writing it down or speaking about it or teaching it, sharing it in various different ways. You're practicing it. You're in your own life, really. We haven't gotten to the teach part yet, but you're practicing it, meaning you're applying it to your own life in various different forms. And then when you've done that, you can adapt it, because now you're seeing how it actually fits in with your life. Like in martial arts, there's a lot of movements that I don't do because they don't feel comfortable to me, especially a lot of stuff in capoeira, which is something that I really love doing. But there's a lot of stuff that I don't feel comfortable with because I'm not practicing things that are not combat effective. I don't feel like I have the capacity, like some other people might have that I don't know about yet, who can practice all these crazy, flashy, flowery things in capoeira and have an extreme combat effectiveness. So I just don't do it because it doesn't work for me, right? So I've adapted it, and then I share what I have practiced and adapted and teach it, right? Sharing and teaching can be similar. They don't have to be the same thing. They can be. But that is the core and the essence right here, is that from everything from metaphysics, which is my study and research, my input, my learning about spirituality, science, and philosophy, music, everything from the lyrics to the vocals and singing and the instrumentation and playing music and the recording of it, and martial arts, the learning of it and the practice of it and the application of it in various different forms comes out to my system, which is healthy living and self-defense. All of that there. With one of the seeds that I planted years ago called hypno-athletics, is exercising your mind towards universal harmony and spiritual wisdom through healthy living and self-defense. And so when you are uniquely and genuinely you, because you are well-rounded, you actually are interesting because you're interested, you don't have to fake this stuff. And what's really fabulous about that is that if you are a person who is looking for a job or in the dating scene, but this actually should eliminate any anxiety or issues that you have in that. Because if you're just actually really a cool person, I mean, come on, I'm a musician who can sing, who practices martial arts, and can read and understand everything and have really in-depth conversations. I mean, like, it's like a no-brainer there. I have no issue talking to anybody. And the amount of times every day, even today included, that I find out from somebody else, that some woman telling me, oh, so-and-so had a crush on you, and this person told me that. And like, it happens just all the time. And I'm not saying this to brag, although it is kind of nice to know. I'm usually always the last person to know. Like years later, I found out, really, because I'm not paying attention to it. But I do. But I'm not so naive to know that it has nothing to do with the fact that I am artistically talented, that I am physically fit, and that I am intellectually stimulating. All that stuff is appealing to your favored choice of being that you want to be with, whether you're hetero, homo, or whatever. They're all the categories that people fit into, right? Like it's just awesome to actually just really be cool than to try to fake it. And that really, overall, in general, is what this is all about. Like, you don't have to make things up if you just actually redirect all that time, energy, and resources that you are utilizing for all of this fakery, and you are applying it to a real practice of actual skills and deliverables that are real. I got a little distracted there because I don't like people parking so close to my car. Sometimes it just really annoys me when there's like all these other empty spots around here. It's so annoying, people. Every time I've done that, whenever I park, like I used to park my car all the time far away from, in the emptiest parking spots that are furthest away from the entrances of different establishments. And the time that I started parking close with everybody else is just to be like, hey, what? My car's all dinged and dented up. It's just, people have zero respect. It's nuts. Okay, well, that's it. I'm not going to go into this anymore, but I'm really going to focus on this whole Truman Show idea, right? That you're really just, if you just operate as who you are and just document and record as much of it as you possibly can and share it, but with a purpose, like a directed purpose to say, hey, look, I'm living a great life. I'm artistically talented. I'm spiritually and morally motivated and educated, and I'm physically fit, right? I'm a real person who's doing real cool things. You don't have to fake any of it. You don't have to make stuff up. You don't have to be performative. You don't have to act like you're more than you are. And you know what? Here's the one last thing I'm going to say about that. All of that actually is really relevant, and you're going to meet the true people in the world that actually are for you, even if you don't have a lot of money, even if you're struggling financially a little bit, even if you don't have a lot of stuff, even if you're homeless, even if you're having a hard time with money, even if you have debt, all of that. Actually being a really cool, authentic, genuine, unique person that you are, that actually does these things and does it because you love it and you refuse to not do it, that is going to pay dividends in building a real community of people who are actually honestly aligned with who you are. It's much better. I know this for a fact. I spend most of my time alone, but I only communicate very clearly and frictionlessly with people who get that, who are not just kind of in it for kind of, I got to go into the store right now because it's about to close. It's 8:53. They close at 9 o'clock, Trader Joe's. So that's it. I'll develop this more later. I am Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.